Hello and welcome to another tutorial by yours truly, David Burt. This time we're going to do part 1 of 12-bar blues. So where the blues come from? Well, I think we all realize that during the 19th century, when the slave ships arrived on our shores, it brought with it an incredible culture musically. Which came first, blues or jazz? I get asked that a lot. I think most historians would agree that probably blues started off first. But jazz was a very close second, and certainly it runs parallel to the blues. In fact, over the years they share many styles back and forth. So why just 12 bars? I mean, certainly, I guess you've heard longer versions of blues rather than just 12 bars. Well, of course, blues techniques and blues notes can be added to traditional music. One that comes to mind is Body and Soul. Let me give you a little example of that. Okay, here are the last 4 bars of Body and Soul, and you'll hear a blues influence right near the end. There it is, that blues feeling. Last 8 bars of When Sunny Gets Blue. Not a 12-bar blue pattern, but just has that blues feeling. So you can feel kind of a nice sliding blues. But let's concentrate on the actual 12-bar blue pattern. It consists of 3 primary chords, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, which we've discussed in previous videos, except these chords are all dominant. So instead of using a major 7 or a 6 on the 1 chord, it's a 7. Instead of using a major 7 or a 6 on the 4 chord, it's a dominant 7th. And of course the 5 chord has a dominant 7th as well. So they're all dominant chords. So the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord are all dominant in nature. Or they could be extended out to ninths or further out than that. Here I have a C9 to an F9, back to a C9, and that could be extended out to a G13. So any of these chords can be extended out. The pattern that they fall is what creates the whole blues feeling. It consists of 12 bars. In the beginning it was very simplified, but regardless of how simple it is and how it evolved over the years, even if I don't play any melodic consideration, you're still going to hear that blues feeling without any melody consideration. Let's take a look. So let's take a look at a very simplified 12-bar blues pattern, and then we'll see how it evolves from this stage. Very simply, 12 bars goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3. Now we move on to the 4 chord, the F7. 1, 2, 3, 1. And then back to the tonic 1 chord. Remember, these are all dominant. To the 5, and bar 12, and then around again. So you can see that that is a very simple 12-bar pattern. Let's see how it evolved from that point. Here we have a little more elaboration than our very basic blues that I just showed you. The last 4 bars are far more active, and let's take a closer look at that when we get to it. So let's count it in and get the feel of blues. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 2. Now we move to the 4 chord, the F7. Back to the tonic, dominant chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. Into the 5 chord. And then to the 4 chord and back to the 1 chord. And here we can use a turnaround, which would send us back. Now, I didn't always use that turnaround. Sometimes I just kept it playing the C7 and the C7 and then another 4 bars. A little bit boring. So you kind of need that break of the 5 chord coming in. So again, the last 4 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, and 1, 2, and our turnaround. And back. Okay, here we have the a little more involved. We bring in the 4 chord just on the 2nd bar and then revert back to the 1 chord. The rest is pretty well the same, and then there's a little more elaboration. Again, this can be done this way or it could be done with a combination of anything that I showed you thus far. So with this extra elaboration, especially in the last 4 bars, makes it perhaps a little more interesting to listen to. Let's give it a go. So we're starting off on our 1 chord. 1, 2. Now we divert to the 4 chord and then back to the 1 chord. Dominant to our 5 chord, to the 4 chord, and elaboration here. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 4, and well, you get the idea. There is a structure with the 12-bar blues. The first 4 bars makes a statement, the next 4 bars repeats that statement, and the last bars tends to bring everything together. Now, it's not obligatory that you do it that way, but I think you'll get the idea if I go, well, my mama told me not to do drugs. That's the first 4 bars. Well, my mama told me not to do drugs. And the final 4 bars, my mama said don't do drugs because you're gonna die. Again you'd go. So kind of have 2 verses and a refrain that just ties everything together. So the last 4 bars are more elaborate than the first 8 bars that are broken into 2 sets of 4. When rock came along in the 50s, they took great pleasure in using the 12-bar blues pattern on many songs. For example, well, it's a 1 for the money, a 2 for the show, a 3 to get ready and go, cat, go and don't you step on my blue suede shoes. You can do anything but any off of those blue suede shoes. There's your 12-bar blues in a rock format. How about Ray Charles? Hey mama with a red dress on, come on love you daddy all night long, alright. Hey, 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 hey. All based on 12-bar blues, but in a rock style. So what key is blues in? Well, of course, blues can be played in any key. Many times it's played in the key of B flat because trumpets like to join in and they're B flat instruments, so the pianists seem to help out the trumpet players by playing in that key. It can literally be played in any key. I'm going to be using the key of C only because it's easier for you to see the blues notes and the non-blues notes. So let's take a look at the structure of the blues scale in C, and it could be of course transposed into any of the other 11 keys. So it consists of the tonic, the top and at the bottom. Goes through a 7th, a flat 7 to the 5th, chromatically down to the 4th note, and steps down to the flattened 3rd, down to the tonic. And the scale, of course, works in both directions. These are all considered steps, even though I'm missing out on the D and the A. I'll bring those notes in part 2 of the blues when we look at alternative harmonies for the blues structure. Any note can work with any of the three chords. For example, here's my C7 chord. I can go down and up the blues scale, no problem at all. My 4 chord, the F7, same thing. And my 5 chord. So any note in a scale will work with any of the three chords. There are the exception of a couple of notes that do cause a bit of a problem, but if they're played as a short value note at a weak point, it's not going to bother anybody at all. Let's take a look at what notes work and the relationship between the notes in the scale and the harmony that I'm using. Okay, the tonic will work with the C chord, obviously, because the C is the root of the chord. The B flat will certainly work. It's the 7th of my C7 chord. The 5th will work. Even the G flat will work. It is heard as a sharp 11 or a sharp 4. Kind of jazzy and blues. The one note that doesn't really work that well is the 4th. You can't have a 4th and a 3rd together. But then again, if it's heard at a short duration, at a weak point in the bar, there's not a problem at all. Didn't even hear the F against that. But if I were to go, that would start to bother you. The E flat works very nicely. This is where people come to the conclusion, well, I think blues is minor mixed in with major, because here I've got a major 3rd and looks like a minor 3rd. Well, not really. You're actually hearing that as a sharp 9, which is a nice bluesy sound. Has that kind of drone sound. So it's not really a minor 3rd against a major 3rd. It's a sharp 9, which gives that nice blues sound. Here's the same scale for a 4 chord, the F7. The 5th has to work because it's part of the chord. The B flat is the one note that's not so great again because it's a 4th against a 3rd. But again, if it happens at a quick point in the bar, short value note, weak beat, didn't bother us at all. The G will work because it's the 9th. The G flat will work, it's the flat 9. The F of course will work because it's the root of the 4 chord. And the E flat is the 7th of the 4 chord, so it works fine. So the only note that's a little problematic would be the B flat on the F7 chord. On the 5 chord, again, all the notes will work, but the C is a bit of a problem. Again, the same idea, because I've got a 4th on against a major 3rd. We'd sometimes like to bring that note in because it is the tonic of the key that I'm playing in. So if I wanted to bring that note in on a strong beat, a longer value note, then I'd adjust my left hand to bring in a suspension or an 11 to allow that note in. So as long as I make that adjustment so I don't have that, I can sit on that note as much as I want. Let's look at the rest of the notes. The B flat will work. Again, that's going to come across as a sharp 9. The root, the G will work. The F sharp or the G flat won't work. It comes across as a major 7, which is not too conducive to blues. So that's the note that I wouldn't spend a lot of time on. Again, if it happens at a quick point, you didn't hear it at all. But if I went, I don't think so. The F of course will work, it's the 7th. The E flat on the 5 chord works beautifully in this case because it comes across as a flat 13. So pretty well any note will work. If you are going to use those notes, play them at a weak point in the bar and make sure the value is short. You won't have a problem at all. Most people that play blues will pick a motif to work with. It's not obligatory, it's not something that you have to do, but it tends to be done. A motif is basically a statement versus a full sentence. It's a thought. Motif can be as many notes as you wanted. I wouldn't get too carried away with that, but at least a minimum of 2 notes. Song Night Train had a 2-note motif. Then it went down the blues scale. Notice I'm rolling the 8th notes. It would not sound very good if I played them straight. And I get into the difference between straight 8s and roll 8s in my tutorial on swing, so you may want to check that out if you're not sure what I'm talking about when I talk about rolling the 8s. But they have a lilt to them. Back to my motif. Motifs tend to work best when they go from a weak point to a strong point in a bar. I'm going to incorporate a triplet in my motif, mainly because roll 8s are based on triplets. So I'm going to come in on the and after the 3rd beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 triplet 1. So there is my motif. So I'm using my motif to set me up into bar 1. As I move into bar 5, I'll probably do the same motif. And when I move into bar 9, the last 4 bars, again, there'll be more of an elaboration. Let's look at the 12-bar structure. I'm only going to play the motif and nothing else. And you'd be surprised at how bluesy it sounds with no other blue melodic considerations involved, just the motif alone. Let's take a look at that. Okay, here is the motif that I've incorporated into my 12-bar blues. I've incorporated an 8th note triplet, mainly because blues have roll 8s in them, which are made up of triplets. You'll notice that I started on a weak point and take my motif into a strong point. So weak to strong, with this motif coming into bar 1. I repeat the motif going into bar 5 and into bar 9, and then here I do an elaboration of the motif. So it's like 2 verses and a refrain, the refrain tying in the first 8 bars together to come to a conclusion, with the motif at the bottom coming back into the first beat of the first bar. Just give that a listen to and see how it sounds. Okay, so we're going to start with our triplets, so let's count it in. 1, 2, and 3, and 4 triplet. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4 triplet. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4 triplet. 1, 2, 3, and 4 triplet. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4 triplet. 1, and back around again. 3, 4, and 1. So you get the idea. Interestingly, I did nothing other than the motifs, and you still really got that blues feeling. So we're going to now take a look at filling in some of these little spots here to end up part 1 of 12-bar blues. Let's finish up our session on part 1 by adding some fillers in between the motif. I'll stick with the same motif, and all I'm going to do is add some little extra notes in between, and you really get the feeling of the blues starting to come together in that 12-bar pattern. Again, you have that rigid pattern that you're stuck with, and the chords change exactly where you expect them to do. The motif helps the listener know exactly where they are inside that 12-bar pattern, but the melodic structure can be as free as a bird and play off against something that's a solid structure. So let's give it a go, and I'll just give you some examples just in closing up here. So again, I'm going to start off with my motif. 1, 2, 3, and 4 triplet. 1, 2. Notice I'm not playing all the time. Here's my motif coming back into bar 5. A little blues scale. And a motif with an elaboration. I can jump to a blues note and return. Remember, the non-blues notes are free. I can leap to a blues note, but it's best to change direction. In other words, I could jump up. I can leap down to a blues note, providing I change direction. Don't want to jump from a blues note to another blues note. That doesn't seem to work. Remember, the blues notes are connector notes. They connect the non-blues notes. And one last time around before we pull the plug. 2. And again, you don't have to be busy. To good taste, whatever good taste is. I'm going to bring my motif in again. Down the blues scale. Back to my motif for the last 4 bars. An elaboration. Biggest thing is having fun. So that's part 1 of the blues. In part 2, I'm going to show you some bass movements, how they integrate with the rest of the structure, and alternative harmonies that I think you'll find quite interesting. Hope you enjoyed my little tutorial. See you up at part 2. Bye for now.